Welcome to Earth Archives. In world history legends, the Great Flood is not exclusive to the Bible. In fact, many civilizations around the world have similar legends. According to analysis by scholars, this should be a common memory of mankind. Is there really such a large-scale flood? The flood happened, but today we are not going to argue about the truth or falsehood, but we are going to talk about where there are flood legends. Before the program starts, please help share and subscribe to the Earth Archives channel. Thank you. The story of a great flood sent by God or the gods to destroy civilization as an act of divine retribution is a widespread theme among many cultural myths. It is best known from the biblical story of Noah, but there are several other famous versions, such as stories of Matsya in the Hindu Puranas, Deucalion in Greek mythology, and Utnapishtim in the Epic of Gilgamesh. Many of the world's cultures past and present have stories of a great flood that devastated earlier civilizations. A good deal of similarity exists between several of the flood myths, leading scholars to believe that these have evolved from or influenced each other. Others of these stories seem to be of a more local nature, although nearly all of them involve the survival of only a small number of humans who repopulate humankind. The scientific community is divided about the historicity of such an event as a great flood. Most archaeologists and geologists recognize that there were indeed major floods that devastated substantial civilized areas, but most deny that there was ever a single deluge in the last 6,000 years that covered the whole Earth or even a major portion of it. Noah's flood. Although the story of Noah's flood may not be the most ancient of the flood stories, it is by far the most well known. In the story recorded in the Book of Genesis, God is saddened by seeing all the evil which has entered man's heart, and decides to destroy all living things on earth. Genesis chapter 6 verse 5-8. He selects Noah, who alone is righteous in his generation, and instructs him to build an ark and to preserve 2 of each creature. Noah builds the ark and God makes it rain for 40 days and 40 nights. After 150 days, the ark comes to rest on the mountain of Ararat. Noah opens a window of the ark and sends forth a raven and a dove. After the earth becomes dry enough, Noah and his family, together with the animals, descend from the ark. Noah offers a sacrifice to God, who accepts his offering and promises, "Never again will I destroy all living creatures." Gen 8:21. God blesses Noah to be fruitful and multiply, and places a rainbow in the sky as a sign of his covenant with Noah and his descendants. Noah then plants a vineyard and becomes drunk with wine. He falls asleep naked, and ends up cursing his grandson, Canaan, to be a slave to his brothers after Canaan's father, Ham, finds Noah sleeping naked in his tent. Ham, ashamed of his father's nakedness, informs his brothers of this. Non-biblical, the 2nd century BCE first Book of Enoch is an apocryphal addition to the Hebrew flood legend. The cause of the evil mentioned in General 6 is linked specifically to the Nephilim, the evil race of giants who are the titanic children of the angelic, sons of God, and human females. Enoch 9-9 explains that, as a result of these unnatural unions, the women bore giants, and thereby the whole earth has been filled with blood and iniquity. The Nephilim are also mentioned in Genesis chapter 6, but in much less detail. Sumerian. The Sumerian myth of Ziusudra tells how the god Enki warns Ziusudra, king of Shuruppak, of the god's decision to destroy mankind in a flood. The passage describing why the gods have decided this is unfortunately lost. Enki instructs Ziusudra to build a large boat. After a flood of 7 days, Ziusudra opens the boat's window and then offers sacrifices and prostrations to An, the sky god, and Enlil, the chief of the gods. He is rewarded by being given eternal life in Dilmun, the Sumerian Eden. The myth of Ziusudra exists in a single copy, the fragmentary Eridu Genesis, datable by its script to the 17th century BCE. The Sumerian king list, a genealogy of historical, legendary, and mythological Sumerian kings, also mentions a great flood. Babylonian, Epic of Gilgamesh. In the Babylonian Epic of Gilgamesh, the story of the flood is told in some detail, with many striking parallels to the Genesis version. The hero, Gilgamesh, seeking immortality, searches out the human immortal Utnapishtim in Dilmun, a kind of terrestrial paradise. Utnapishtim tells how Ea, the Babylonian equivalent of the Sumerian Enki, warned him of the god's plan to destroy all life through a great flood and instructed him to build a vessel in which he could save his family, his friends and servants, his cattle, and other wealth. The deluge comes and covers the earth. As in the Genesis version, Utnapishtim sends out both a dove and raven from his boat before descending on dry land. After the deluge, he offers a sacrifice to the gods, who repented their action and make Utnapishtim immortal. Akkadian, Atrahasis Epic. The Babylonian Atrahasis Epic, written no later than 1700 BCE, the name Atrahasis means, exceedingly wise, gives human overpopulation as the cause for the Great Flood. After 1,200 years of human fertility, the god Enlil feels disturbed in his sleep due to the noise and commotion caused by the growing population of mankind. He turns for help to the divine assembly who send a plague, then a drought, a famine, and then saline soil, all in an attempt to reduce the numbers of mankind. All these temporary measures prove ineffective as, 1,200 years after each solution, the original problem returns. When the gods decide on a final solution, to send a flood, the god Enki, who has a moral objection to this solution, discloses the plan to Atrahasis, who then builds a survival vessel according to divinely given measurements. To prevent the other gods from bringing another such harsh calamity, Enki creates new solutions in the form of social phenomena such as non-marrying women, barrenness, miscarriages and infant mortality, in order to help keep the population from growing out of control. India. The Hindu version of Noah is named Manu. He is warned by an incarnation of Vishnu of the impending Great Flood, enabling him to build a boat and survive to repopulate the earth. According to the texts Matsya Purana and Shatapatha Brahmana, I-8-1-6, Manu was a minister to the king of pre-ancient Dravida. He was washing his hands in a river when a little fish swam into his hands and begged him to save its life. He put the fish in a jar, which it soon outgrew. He successively moved it to a tank, a river and then the ocean. The fish then warned him that a deluge would occur in a week that would destroy all life. It turned out that fish was none other than Matsya, fish in Sanskrit, the first avatar of Vishnu. Manu therefore built a boat which Matsya towed to a mountaintop when the flood came, and thus he survived along with some seeds of life, to re-establish life on earth. Greek mythology knows three floods. The flood of Ogyges, the flood of Deucalion and the flood of Dardanus, two of which ended 2 ages of man. The Ogygian deluge ended the Silver Age, and the flood of Deucalion ended the First Bronze Age. Ogyges. The Ogygian flood is so called because it occurred in the time of Ogyges, a mythical king of Attica. The name Ogyges is synonymous with primeval, or earliest dawn. He was the mythical founder and king of Thebes. The Ogygian flood covered the whole world and was so devastating that the country remained without kings until the reign of Scrops, 1556–1506 BCE. Plato in his Laws, Book 3, estimates that this flood occurred 10,000 years before his time. Also in Timaeus and in Critias, 111,112, Plato describes the Great Deluge of all, during the 10th millennium BCE. Deucalion. The Deucalion legend, as told by Apollodorus in the library, has some similarity to Noah's flood, and the name Deucalion is related to wine, of which the biblical Noah was the inventor. When the anger of Zeus was ignited against the hubris of the Pelasgians, Zeus decided to put an end to the First Bronze Age with the deluge. Prometheus advised his son Deucalion to build a chest or ark to save himself, and other men perished except for a few who escaped to high mountains. The mountains in Thessaly were parted, and all the world beyond the Isthmus and Peloponnese was overwhelmed. Deucalion and his wife Pyrrha, after floating in a chest for 9 days and nights, landed on Parnassus. An older version of the story told by Hellanicus has Deucalion's ark landing on Mount Uthres in Thessaly. Another account has him landing on a peak, probably Phoca, in Argolis, later called Nemea. When the rain ceased, he sacrificed to Zeus. Then, at the bidding of Zeus, he threw stones behind him, and they became men. His wife Pyrrha, who was the daughter of Epimetheus and Pandora, also threw stones, and these became women. Dardanus. According to Dionysius of Halicarnassus, Dardanus, a son of Zeus and Electra, left Phoenius in Arcadia to colonize a land in the northeast Aegean Sea. When the deluge occurred, the land was flooded, and the mountain on which he and his family survived formed the island of Samothrace. Dardanus left Samothrace on an inflated skin to the opposite shores of Asia Minor and settled at the foot of Mount Ida. Due to fear of another flood, he did not build a city, but lived in the open for 50 years. His grandson Tros eventually built a city, which was named Troy after him. Aztec. There are several variants of the Aztec flood story. One of the more famous is that of Nota, the Aztec version of Noah. However, this story is controversial for several reasons, especially because it was recorded by Spanish scribes well after Christian culture had a chance to interact with Aztec civilization. When the Sun Age came, there had passed 400 years. Then came 200 years, then 76. Then all mankind was lost and drowned and turned to fishes. The water and the sky drew near each other. In a single day all was lost. But before the flood began, Titlahawan had warned the man Nota and his wife Nina, saying, "Make no more pulque, but hollow a great cypress, into which you shall enter the month Tzuzli. The waters shall near the sky." They entered, and when Titlahawan had shut them in he said to the man, "Thou shalt eat but a single ear of maize, and thy wife but one also." And when they had each eaten one ear of maize, they prepared to go forth, for the water was tranquil. In the early days of biblical archaeology, prominent academics believed they had discovered evidence for a historical worldwide flood, but this view has been largely abandoned. Instead, it is generally agreed that devastating local floods, covering large flat areas such as those between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, could easily have given rise to the stories of Ziusudra, Atrahasis, Utnapishtim, and Noah. Excavations in Iraq have shown evidence of a major flood at Shuruppak about 2900–2750 BCE, which extended nearly as far as the city of Kish, whose king Etana supposedly founded the first Sumerian dynasty after the flood. Flood geology is propounded by biblically oriented scientists who have tried to support the Great Flood theory scientifically, but this is not accepted by the majority of geologists, both Christian and non-Christian, who consider it a form of pseudoscience. Among other theories concerning the origins of the legends of a great flood, there has been speculation that a large tsunami in the Mediterranean Sea caused by the huge eruption of the volcano Thera, ca. 1630–1500 BCE, was the historical basis for folklore that evolved into the Deucalion myth. Some have also suggested that flood myths could have arisen from folk stories related to the huge rise in sea levels that accompanied the end of the last ice age some 10,000 years ago, passed down the generations as an oral history. In 1998, William Ryan and Walter Pittman, geologists from Columbia University, published evidence that a massive flood of waters from the Mediterranean Sea through the Bosporus occurred about 5600 BCE, resulting in widespread destruction of major population centers around the Black Sea. It is suggested that this would have naturally resulted in various great flood myths as major cities would have been lost to these waters.